Yes, we are live. Excellent. How are you? How you doing, guys?
I'm, Hi there. I'm doing great. How are you, Dr. Rob?
I'm doing awesome. I got you. I did it all by myself, everybody. I want everybody to know that I did it all by myself. I got a good friend, Palmer, here, and she had interviewed me, and I have to tell you, she excited me so much intellectually about autoimmunity and processes to help people with autoimmunity. I invited her to come on. I wanted to pick a Friday because we know I get a lot of viewership on Friday. So here she is. Tell everybody, tell everybody your story. Share it with everybody.
Well, that's a good place to start. I'll make it a short story, but I think some people may resonate with this. Um, I have to take you back in time a little bit because when I was 19, I was diagnosed with MS. And it was a diagnosis out of the clear blue sky. This was something that just, hit me and my family like a ton of bricks. I had been in college for my freshman year, happy, healthy, no indication that this was something that was coming. And all of a sudden, one morning I woke up and the soles of my feet were all tingly. And over the course of the morning, that tingling just crept up my legs like a vine. And that afternoon, I was sitting with my parents in the neurologist's office at UCLA. And this woman, this doctor, said after a cursory exam, she just had me walk across her floor heel toe and touch my fingers to my eyes. And she pronounced, "I'm 99% certain that you have MS, multiple sclerosis. And if I'm right, there's nothing you can do except take medication." So we were absolutely floored. We had never heard of MS. Now, because I'm taking you back in time, this is the 80s. And we left her office with very little information, very little hope. And she had pulled my parents aside and said, you better get ready for her life in a wheelchair because that's where she's heading. So that was an absolutely terrifying prognosis and diagnosis. And later that night, my family and I got home, and that tingling had crept all the way up underneath my chin. By nightfall, my mom crawled into bed with me and she's holding me and crying. And I'm crying harder because by this time, I can't feel anything in my body. My body had gone completely numb from the neck down and would stay that way for a full 6 weeks. So this is now the mid 80s. I'm lying on the couch and it's frightening. We don't know what the future is going to hold at all. Am I going to be able to go back to school? Are my parents going to have to take care of me? I mean, this was just a mystery. Remember, there's no internet at the time. There's no Dr. Terry Walls or anything like this. And we're left to our own devices and fear. It was really awful. Now
Wow.
I can give you a little bit of the short story of some important things that happened that summer. Just to put a bow on this. My dad had been a fighter pilot and his way was invariably the right way. And so he and I used to butt heads quite a bit. And I was super grateful because my parents were extremely supportive and very loving. They had adopted me when I was a baby. So as I lay on the couch that summer, my mom was super supportive. Both of my parents were super supportive. My dad used to say, "Honey, you could beat this thing." And that became the title of the book because of my dad's super support and encouraging nature. And I was super thankful that so many friends came by that weren't too scared off by this mysterious disease. And good friends brought books, and what do good friends bring you when you're 19? Cookies and things like that. And this one family friend came by with a pivotal question that became my North Star for the next 3 decades and still is a guiding light for me. And she asked me, "Palmer, why do you think you got the MS? Why do you think you got the MS?"
Good question.
And I was just floored. I mean, my first instinct was to get super defensive. "What do you mean? Why do you think I got the MS? Do you think I created this? Do you think I brought this on?" But that question has never left me to this day. I still always want to get to the root of why things happen. But that set me on a path because I started really chewing on that question. And until as I'm lying on the couch at age 19, and it comes to me as a flash of insight that maybe it's chronic stress, because that battles that I used to have with my dad, the butting of heads and so forth, really took a toll on me. I became hypervigilant as a child. I had insomnia. I was always on searching the environment for safety. And so I had that hypothesis that in fact, chronic stress was at the root. And I have no idea how I got this intuition that my immune system must have developed that hypervigilance too, that always on. And now we know that autoimmunity is a state of maybe too much vigilance. It's fighting everything, right? So if I didn't have a real battle to wage, that maybe I would create friendly fire. It would start attacking myself. So I began doing stress reduction practices as early as the late 80s. I started doing yoga. I started to meditate in the early 90s. And those were things that I started building that practice of learning how to relax, because I noticed that when I was stressed out, I would have more exacerbations of the MS. And yet when I relaxed, when I practiced relaxing, I would actually not have as many exacerbations and things were more steady state.
And you wrote a book. It's right there in the background. Why don't you show everybody the book where they can get it?
Yep. So this book behind me, if I'm getting the right way there, Beat
Right,
Autoimmune. Got it. So that came in time. It came out last year, as a matter of fact. But the reason I wrote it was that finally I had empowered myself to really keep going and pursue these natural strategies that ultimately worked. But let me just briefly tell you that, stress reduction helped greatly, but that wasn't the end of the story. I did a whole bunch of experimentation with diet, and the best that anybody had to offer in the 80s and 90s was go low fat, go vegetarian, give that a try, right? Well, that didn't work for me. I had more tummy troubles and more problems. So I ultimately, went back to an omnivore diet of eating meat. And now I've landed on a paleo template style diet, which is best for me. But it wasn't until 2010 when I finally found a functional medicine nutritionist that did some tests on me to find out that I have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, meaning I don't have celiac disease, but I have this sensitivity to eating gluten, which, by the way, as many of us did, I was eating gluten with every meal, right? Big bowls of cereal in the morning, you'd have a sandwich for lunch, maybe pasta, pizza, beer. I had no idea that this was inflaming my gut and leading me down this bad path. So finally, when she told me about the gluten, I removed it. She led me through this gut healing 30-day program. And at the end of a week, I stopped having tummy troubles after eating. I thought everybody had rumbling tummies after eating. I thought that was normal. I'd had it for so long, but I removed the gluten, healed the gut, and finally, within a month of removing the gluten, I stopped having any and all MS symptoms ever again. So that was November of 2010 when I stopped having any symptoms. Haven't had any since. Didn't set out to write a book. That was not my intention. But finally, when I quit my day job, I've been in sales and marketing for years and years in the corporate world, but decided, I had been told by 6 neurologists over 26 years that there was nothing I could do to beat the MS, that I would have it forever. So disempowering, right? I had my dad saying, honey, you can beat this thing. I just needed to figure out how. But finally, when I did, I thought, this is crazy. People aren't given this message of hope from their neurologists. So that's when I dug in and found so much science that shows us how this is actually possible, like epigenetics. There's an autoimmune equation. So the book is what finally came out of that.
The reason I'm looking down a little bit is for whatever reason, I'm having a little trouble technically with my laptop. So I'm looking at my phone. I'm looking at us on our phone. And people love to DM me. They don't like to comment. So somebody asked the question. It's a great question. So you're not, basically the question is, what's the difference between celiac? What's the difference between non-sensitive celiac? And the great question is, if you're not either one of the two, can you eat gluten? So I teed them up for you. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. So great question. Celiac disease is actually an autoimmune condition where we actually know the root cause. And that's the rub of autoimmunity is now we know that there is a genetic component that may only represent 5 to 10% of your health outcomes. So genes, where we used to blame our parents for everything, only represent a really small amount. Then there's those inflammatory lifestyle factors that I call fights, which we'll get into, that represent those environmental triggers. And then there's something that happens called a leaky gut, which is intestinal hyperpermeability. So you have those three things that lead to autoimmunity. And celiac disease is the only autoimmune condition where we know specifically what one of the biggest root causes is, and that is gluten. So celiacs are people that have been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called celiac disease. And we know the trigger is gluten, so they can remove all sources of gluten, which are often hidden. So super important to really be clear about what's causing that, right? Non-celiac gluten sensitivity is you don't necessarily have an autoimmune condition called celiac disease, but your body creates antibodies against this inflammatory protein. It's a storage protein found in all grains. Wheat happens to be a big baddie. And so it's this insidious form where we don't know that it's causing harm until we do an experiment and take it out and then see how we react to it. There was a research study done in 2015 by Alessio Fasano, who's now at Harvard Medical School, who discovered that gluten, that inflammatory protein, creates a leaky gut in anyone who eats it, anyone. So I'm not saying that anyone who eats gluten is going to wind up with an autoimmune condition, but I am saying if you have the proclivity for one and you continue to eat gluten, which is inflaming your gut and causing it to be leaky, which is the gateway to autoimmunity, then that's the bad path. So it's probably, from my research, the single biggest root cause that has been discovered when it comes to autoimmune conditions.
That was a great article by Fasano. He's wonderful. He's a great presenter, and we hope to get him on. But more so than that, that article which you referenced was great. Also spoke about the leaky gut. So it opened up your gut permeability for a duration of time. It wasn't a permitted opening. But if you think about it, if it is the gateway to your health, why would you ever want to open it? So
that's right.
The real takeaway here is it's really bad if you have celiac disease. It's bad if you have non-gluten sensitivity, but you still shouldn't eat gluten even if you don't.
That's right.
So gluten, no bueno, non-starter. Got another question. Sorry. So
please.
One person asked about the fights. I think we'll hold off. The second thing is, okay, so you had MS. So essentially they're saying it went away once you stopped eating certain things. If that's the case, why and how?
Yeah. So it's a great question, because I'm always quick to say that my story, I'm not suggesting that you can just remove one food and be done with an autoimmune condition. It's much more complex than that. Autoimmune conditions are multifactorial. For some people, it's a combination of foods. It can be heavy metals like mercury. We're finding more problems with aluminum. A lot of people have mold sensitivities. There's more Lyme disease. So there's so many factors involved here. In my own, that's why we have to talk about the toxin bucket, right? We all have a body burden of toxins. And this is why autoimmunity is becoming epidemic, because there are more and more toxins and toxicants in our environment. You can think metaphorically that each of us carries a bucket within us. And we can put these inflammatory factors in, like I had a sugar addiction as a kid, right? I mean, think about when you were growing up, how much sugar did you eat? We have a tolerance for things until the bucket goes tilt and things start to spill over. So what's in that bucket? It could be the mercury from the fillings that I got as a result of having the sugar addiction, which I did. It could be chronic Lyme disease, which adds another layer of inflammation. It can be the stress, which is maybe the biggest baddie of all of them. That chronic, unrelenting stress is toxic. All of those elements fill your bucket, right? But my bucket may not look exactly like yours. And that's why I came up with fights, because I did research. I wanted to help people understand what are those inflammatory environmental factors that we can control, right? There's a lot of things in life we can't control, but there are things that we can do. So it's really about getting the right information that's science-based and then doing your own experiments to see what works for you. That's what this is all about. So if you find your environmental factors, remove them, heal and seal the lining of your gut, which is the research that Dr. Fasano and his team discovered. They talk about the potential of reversing autoimmune, not just putting it into remission like it's sitting there waiting to come back, but the actual reversal of autoimmunity. Because when you seal and heal up your gut, you can change your genetic expression. Now, I'm really clear that I'll always have the genes for MS, but whether or not those genes get expressed is largely up to me.
And it's right. Genes are not your destiny. They load the gun. They don't fire the gun. Your environment, your lifestyle does that. And we call that epigenetics, your expression of your genes. So walking in to talk to one of us and saying mommy's fat and daddy's fat, and that's why I'm fat, doesn't necessarily fly anymore. So you brought it up, fights. Let's go through it. I know it's an acronym for something. So
Yes.
let's piece it by piece.
So again, as I was puzzling and pondering, what in the world did I do to actually reverse the MS? I didn't have all the science about gluten at the time, but I was really curious as to what people could do. And the more I researched, things started to categorize, and I like words. And so I decided to come up with a word that people could remember that stood for those root causes that we can control. And so F is food, I is infections, G is gut health, H is hormone balance, T is toxins, and S is stress. So fights. Those are all of the root cause, the big categories. And underneath stress, I put sleep and exercise and so forth, because those are really helpful to, the antidote to stress, so to say. So there's the bad fights that gets us into the problem, but if you flip them, there's the good side. So there's the inflammatory food, there's the nourishing food, and that's why fights works.
Great. So let's expand a little bit on that. Let's go and give me some of the bad foods. Give me some examples of the infection, stuff like that. So everybody listening gets a little taste.
Sure. Sure. Well, we've already kind of beat on gluten for a while. The next biggest baddie when it comes to foods is animal dairy. And it turns out it's not the lactose in animal dairy. It's usually the casein, which is an inflammatory protein. And dairy is what is called cross-reactive with gluten, meaning for people with autoimmune proclivities, if you know you have the genes for something, it runs in your family, and you're eating the cheese, as we talked about earlier, or you're continuing to drink milk or whatever, your body may think that it's eating gluten, because there's, I forget which array it is in Cyrex, maybe number 4. Cyrex Laboratory exists to help people try to prevent autoimmunity, but you can actually find out which foods you're sensitive to. And so casein seems to be very cross-reactive with gluten, and maybe 70% of all people who are sensitive to gluten are also sensitive to cow dairy. That's what the research shows, and I found that to be true in my experience working with clients. And the third one, which gets a lot of press because of its connection with obesity, is sugar. And people don't really think about sugar when it comes to your immunity. And this is really important now when we're trying to prevent COVID-19, is to think about your sugar intake. And I'm not just talking about sucrose. I'm talking about honey, maple syrup, even fructose from fruit. We've known since the 70s, there was a research study that showed that sugar blocks your immune system from functioning properly for up to 5 hours after eating it. And autoimmunity is an immune system problem. It's not a body part problem. So I didn't have a problem. Well, it's arguable with my brain. I have a problem with my own immune system attacking the myelin sheath. That's my weak link. For people that have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, as an example, it's not necessarily a thyroid problem. It's a problem that your immune system is attacking your thyroid. So can you really afford to be blocking your immune system from functioning by eating sugar? That is number 3.
Right. Autoimmune. Most people don't realize that it's not the virus. it's not the pathogen, it's your body's response to the pathogen. And when you attack yourself, it's autoimmunity. And most degeneration occurs from autoimmunity. So really, any practitioner should understand the concepts of autoimmunity and want to manage and modulate inflammation. We talked a little bit about gut balance and all that. How about the hormone production?
Yeah. Hormone. So in my book, the chapters, I go through all of fights, but they're not in the order that fights is spelled. Hormones is last because hormones is downstream from everything else, as you know, right? And hormones is a really big category. I talk about the top 6 imbalances, of which I suffered from all of them. There are 2 biggest baddies. One is high cortisol, which is your stress level. Your cortisol goes up. And when your cortisol goes up, everything else comes down, like your sex hormones, right? Your thyroid hormone production, everything else kind of gets depressed. So, and insulin, high levels of insulin is one of the biggest risk factors for autoimmunity, but it's also a huge risk factor when it comes to obesity. And now we're seeing these hypometabolic states that are big risk factors for COVID-19 and other infections. Those are all things to think about, but there's some simple things that people can do. Did you know that vitamin D is a hormone? It's a pro-hormone. And it's one of the things I think science has recently shown that people who've had worse outcomes with COVID-19 actually have a lower level of vitamin D3. So it's one of the simplest things that people can do is actually get your vitamin D levels up. That's a super simple and practical thing that people can do right away.
Sorry, again, I'm using the phone. So if I'm not doing the eye connection, I'm not a bad host. We've got some comments. Wow, so much information. 2, thanks for sharing. Now I got a message. It's a little risque, but I'm going to go for it. They're saying women get autoimmunity more often than men.
That is true.
Let's just wait, right? Why?
So there may not be definitive reasons, like there isn't a consensus about why this is a problem. And this is interesting because it actually ties into COVID. It has to do with estrogen and estrogen production, and it has to do with women's ability to defend and protect against infections. Women seem to mount a stronger reaction in general to infections. And it's that inflammation that is created as a result of that strong attack that keeps the body in an inflamed state, that it puts somebody in a greater disposition for autoimmunity. And when you think about what's happening now, I would expect that based on that description, there would be more women having bad outcomes with COVID-19. That's not what we're seeing. So I don't quite understand what's happening there, but there is in general, just some quick stats, there may be 150 autoimmune conditions that we know about today, and more diseases like Alzheimer's, heart disease, are getting reclassified as in part autoimmune, and that overall, it's a women's issue, 80% to 20%, something like that. And different autoimmune conditions have different ratios. So with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, the most common autoimmune condition, maybe 80 to 90% of people with Hashimoto's are women. Whereas with MS, it's more 60-40 women to men. So there is some variability in terms of the type of autoimmunity, but that's my understanding of the reason for the female, the predominance of autoimmune being a women's issue.
I think there's like you said, the estradiol type of dominance. So the reason that women are more protected against COVID is they're more virulent against the viral response because they're able to fight viruses. So hence the idea maybe that they're more in tune to attack each other. There's some other studies now, very interesting, going to the G portion, your gut, that women's bacteria and men's bacteria are a little different. And it's conceivable that the women's bacteria are more susceptible because of their diversity to that kind of autoimmune issues. It would be really interesting to get a definite hard answer. I figured I was happy that, I'm not trying to be funny. I was happy that you were female and they didn't throw that out to a male. That I got another, you don't mind me asking you the question?
Oh, please go right away.
It's raw, so we're going for it. I'm looking at the phone and everything of that nature. And you didn't really cover yet, so I'll get to the toxin question. Women can, this is a well-versed person. Women are exposed to more toxins because they use typically more beauty aids and kits than men do.
True.
Where are the biggest toxins that women take in the beauty aids?
That is a really good question. So I may not have an exact, like, I know the biggest toxicant. So the difference between toxins and toxicants, the term toxicant is something from the outside, and a toxin is something that's a byproduct of something we create on the inside. So the toxicants that are in the makeup, the parabens, it's huge, right? In lotion, there's something that just gets me every single time. It's called fragrance. You see that on your body care, and you don't wear makeup, so we don't need to worry about that. But there is this concept
on Facebook Live at this point.
Yeah. Okay. There's this term called fragrance. When you see that in your products, I'm gonna share something kind of gross. I hope that's okay.
Go for it.
It is a catch-all for something that could include the secretions from the animal beaver's anal gland.
It's beaver anal gland. Go for it. Yeah, Mark Hyman says it all the time.
Okay. I haven't said that in a live interview before, so that was a little risque for me.
I said it for you. It's
Thank you. That is something that if you're willing to take that risk, go for it. But whenever I see the word fragrance, that to me is if you're not going to be clear about what's in that product, I'm not going to use it. So there are a couple places I direct people where they can go get the data on what's in their personal care products and which products to use. And this is really handy. The Environmental Working Group is a great resource. It's a nonprofit. They do a lot of research on our environmental toxins. And they've got a site. Oh my goodness, I'm spacing on it. They offer the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen for produce. And they have it's called Skin Deep. Skin Deep is the part of their website. So if you go to environmentalworkinggroup.org and then you look at their Skin Deep database, you can see what they recommend as far as what you should be putting on your face and your body, or what you should be cleaning your home with, and what you should be avoiding. There's also an app that you can put right on your phone called Think Dirty, and you can scan your products, right? You want to know what's in your sunscreen. It's the time of year where people are going to be going outside and putting on sunscreens. Download the Think Dirty app, and you can scan your products and see whether or not they are, filled with chemicals or they're good to go.
Great sources. And there was also vanilla extract from the Beaver guy. So just so you know, that one's even worse than the fragrance. So anybody can Google that up and check us. Google's always right. It gives degrees if you read it enough.
That's right. But can I add one other thing though? Because this is really important. I want to make sure that we cover this. 70% of your toxin load, your overall toxin load, may be coming from the food that you eat. So if you're not eating organic food and biodynamic food and so forth, those toxins, the glyphosate and the chemicals and the herbicides that are added or grown in the seeds of the food that you're eating, and not just the vegetables, right? Not just the grains, but what do they feed animals? They fatten cows with grains, and the grains that they're using are genetically modified, which include proteins that our bodies have never recognized before. And most of the trigger for autoimmune conditions are these protein molecules, these large protein fragments. So there have been studies that show, and Dr. Joseph Pizzorno talks about this, that we can lower our toxic load pretty quickly because these are non-persistent toxins just by switching to an organic diet. I mean, really pretty quickly. They did a study, I think it was in Sweden, where they showed that children who had been eating conventionally grown produce and conventionally raised meats, who switched to all grass-fed meat, wild fish, and an organic diet were able to reduce their body burden of toxins by 50% in just about 5 days. So those things can happen pretty quickly. This is how empowering this is, that I say, I have this term called little hinges swing big doors, because these small things that we can do are consequential. They add up. You can see this, right?
Oh, it's great. And the organic, I love to piggyback on in that I wholeheartedly agree. And I know you're probably drinking tea, but coffee is the most drunk beverage in America.
Yes.
Right in here.
Good too.
Yeah, absolutely. 3.2 cups of coffee, average person, full of pesticides. Third most sprayed item in America. Just making that change alone will truly change your health. And it's not what you eat, it's what your food ate or was sprayed with.
Exactly. I love that.
Yeah. So it's those little things that you can share with people. You know, what was the soil? So obviously that's a difference between organic or not.
Right.
What was in the soil? Where did it come from?
Right.
What part of the country? What
Exactly.
part of the world? How much did they take care of it? Was it grown in your backyard? I mean, when you hear the word home cooked, and you would have closed your eyes and try and allow that to be evocative, doesn't it have a very nice, healthy connotation? Takeout, very different. Fine dining. There's a reason why we use these words to explain all of it. Organic shouldn't be, oh, it doesn't taste good. Wrong. It tastes very good because you can taste the nutrients in the food. It's that processed food. They have to, it's to somebody like a bad night's sleep and didn't have a calm, they got to spruce themselves up. That's regular food. And it's somebody who taking care of themselves and had a good night's sleep looks enriched. And that's what organic food is. So you are what you eat, but you really are what your food ate.
I love that. And we have to talk about this too in the area of toxins. It turns out that the air we breathe inside our homes and office buildings may be way more, as in almost 100% more toxic than outdoor air. Now, obviously, it depends where you live. If you live near a highway, there are going to be some consequences from that. Or if you live near a chemical plant or something. But in general, just being inside in these hermetically sealed buildings, we won't even get into mold. I'm just talking about regular old air that we breathe can be very, very stale and up to 90 or 100% more toxic than outdoor air. So there's simple things that people can do for that. Getting house plants, super helpful. Just opening up your windows. If you can get outside, really great for your health.
Absolutely. We use a humidifier. So I know my wife she's not here. She's in the office doing something. So she's probably going to hear me on the 3-second delay. So put where you get the humidifier and put our code there, because we found that to be really effective. And we share it with all our patients. And if you want to talk about toxins, and again, if anybody's interested, reach out. I can help you with this. You spend about a third of your time in bed. Almost every mattress has flame retardants. You're sleeping on a flame retardant. We sleep on a non-flame retardant mattress. The reason that you had flame retardants was in the 50s, the tobacco owners came to the government and said, people are smoking in the bedroom. I don't smoke. They're falling asleep and poof, it's going up. So let's put flame retardants in the mattress. Well, one, that doesn't fly. Two, God forbid that the fire comes up there. By the time it gets there, if you haven't woken up, it really just doesn't matter at that point. Why would you want to sleep on a flame retardant mattress? So if anybody's interested, reach out to me. These are simple things that people can change. People tell me that they're gluten-free. And for the most part, when the women come in, they say gluten-free. And there's a reason why I'm speaking about the women. And I say, are you wearing lipstick? And they go, yes. Well, is it a gluten-free lipstick? So as you know, you said fragrances, well, lipstick. Toothpaste is a problem. Not only is it gluten to hold it together, more so than that, it has an ingredient called triclosan. 75% of people who were tested with toothpaste that had triclosan had leaky gut, which is in your fights. So stress, that was your culprit. Perish the thought that I would have any stress as a type A personality. So tell us about the stress and tell us how you were able to modulate that. And it's not just the mental and physical stress, it is stress at the gut level.
Oh my goodness, this is a very large category, but it matters. It's consequential. And these stressors, I mean, it could be emotional, physical, chemical, mental, all of this stress adds up. But I think what you're specifically talking about is the emotional side of things, right? The like the stress, the always on. But we have this, as you very well know, this autonomic nervous system that has two branches: the sympathetic side, which is your always on stress response. You want to be like able to engage that. If you're running from a tiger, you want that. And then there's the other side, which is the parasympathetic rest and digest side. Now, it's helpful to just think about it this way, that you're always on sympathetic stress response. You don't need to do anything to activate that. You don't need to practice the stress response. In fact, it's not a response, it's a reaction, right? Because it just happens automatically. When your spouse or somebody says something to you, you get triggered and you're off and going. Whereas the counterbalance to that, and the only place where healing happens, is in the relaxation response, that parasympathetic side. So we need to practice relaxation techniques or have these relaxation habits so that we can counteract that stress reaction. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense
because,
to me.
because there are three types of stress. There's tame stress, which is, we could define as like getting on an interview to do something like this with you is tame stress, right? It takes a little bit of effort. You might get butterflies before you do something, but you grow through the process. Then there's tolerable stress, which we all face, maybe a breakup, the death of a loved one, a lost job. If we have the resources and the support to get through that, we might grow through those experiences too. But then there's something called toxic stress, which is always on, unrelenting, chronic job loss, maybe a caregiver, you're dealing with caring for somebody with dementia. You're just unable to get yourself out of that stuck stress response. And that's what I had growing up with the combating situation that I had with my dad, who he was alcoholic and used to call my mom names. That was a chronic boatload of stress that actually became toxic in my life. So we need to be really aware of where we are with stress. You know, are you able to let go of some things? Are there things that you can let go of that you don't necessarily control? So one thing that I did for myself was I called it a give to list. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So in the late 90s, actually this was in the late 2000s, I was on a number of boards. I was running a sales team. I had both parents in hospital beds in the home I grew up in, and I had MS. It was a really super stressful time for me. And I had a friend when I flew back to Vermont to one of these board meetings who said, Palmer, you're like a leaky bathtub. You just need filling up. And I can see that you're really under a tremendous amount of stress, the bags under the eyes, I was really at my wit's end. And I got on the airplane to come home, and I decided to write down and this is a really effective exercise. It was for me, and I recommend this to my clients, to write down everything that's stressing you out. Make a list of all of those things that are stressing you out. It could be from work. It could be, a relationship, whatever it is, caregiving. Write it down. And on the right-hand side of the paper, decide what you're going to do about each one of those. So for me, I was running a sales team, and I had a guy on my team that wasn't pulling his weight, and it was stressing me out. So on the right side of the page, I decided I was going to go meet with the VP of HR and come up with a plan for this guy, because it was stressing me out. But the reality was I could do something about that. So I wrote it down. And the next thing was, I am really, really stressed out about my parents' health. And on the right side of the page, the only thing that I could really do about that, because of course, when you care about someone and they are suffering, you're always going to experience that suffering too. But there were certain things that I could do, like I could help manage their medications, their doctor visits. Those were all the physical things that I could do. But the waking up in the middle of the night because I was scared that I was going to get a phone call that something had happened to my parents, let it go. So I got really clear about all of the things that were stressing me out. I put them on the left side of the page, and on the right side, all of the things that I could actually do if there was action I could take, or give to, and then ... You might say give to God, you might say give to the universe, you might say give to your lawyer, you know, whoever it is that you can give, offload that, you can actually reduce your level of stress just by taking inventory of the things that are stressing you out. That was huge.
So you were able to modify and manage your stress all on your own by using that exercise. That's interesting. So fights, food, infection, gut balance, gut health, hormone production, T, toxin, S, stress, the best way to avoid autoimmunity. So tell me about your book. I mean, I know this is in your book, but tell me about your book.
Yeah.
Tell me how they can get it. Tell me some of the things that you're doing.
Sure. So the book came out exactly this time last year. So it's still on Amazon. It hit 8 bestseller in 8 different categories, which is amazing, and has been #1 in immunology lately, which is crazy because people are concerned about how they can prevent COVID-19. Well, it turns out the same things, the same fights factors we use to reverse an autoimmune condition are the same things that we can do to safeguard our health against threats, viral threats, et cetera, like COVID-19. So people can find the book on Amazon. That's probably the best place. It's around $10. It's out in paperback form. It's also in a Kindle edition and Audible as well. And I'm really honored that Mark Hyman, functional medicine pioneer, wrote the foreword. It's something that he's passionate about, and through my own process of finding functional medicine, I realized that all the questions that I was asking of why I got the MS in the first place can be answered through a framework of functional medicine, which is all about getting to the root cause and addressing those systems at the deepest layers, not symptom relief, systems based. And so that's what the book is all about. It came out, people have given me really good feedback about the book, but they wanted more. So I also am a certified functional medicine health coach. I provide one-on-one coaching, and I run a group called Beat Autoimmune Academy, which is an online program, both a private Facebook group as well as we go through the book and go through things deeply, one chapter at a time. So there's content, there's community. It's a great time to be in a community like yours, like mine, because we need to stay connected. This is how we thrive. We can't be isolated. It's one of the biggest stressors there is this social isolation. So being in intentional, thoughtful communities that are working together to be healthy and really achieve vibrant health, not just getting better, but getting better than ever. That's what's so exciting to me, is the possibility is not just to get back to where you were, but to get much better than you were.
That's great. That's great. And how can they get in touch with you?
So my website is palmerkippola.com. That's where you can go to find out about me and find out more about Beat Autoimmune Academy at beatautoimmuneacademy.com.
Outstanding. This is fun. We have to do it again.
I am so glad you asked me. It was a ball. I look forward to the next time.
And you like that they DM me questions versus put them in the comments. I'm clueless why people love to do that, but they did. Nevertheless, I'm here with Palmer. I'm Rob. We went very, very casual today. It's Friday afternoon. Thanks a lot, everybody. Dr. Rob Silverman, Improvement Health Alternatives, always yours in health.
Take good care.